I'm Susan Eymann with Lethbridge Sport Council, and on behalf of the Sport Tourism Advisory Committee, we're thrilled to have you here. We're thrilled to have you join us as we kick into high gear, I guess, the conversation around sport tourism. I'd like to, let me see, where have people wandered to? I'd like to thank a few people for joining us this evening. Councillor Mark Campbell. And from the city, Lloyd Brierley, with a very appropriate name. And Mike Fox. Now we'd like to express our land and cultural acknowledgement with this video that was produced by the city.
As well as other First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We respect Indigenous peoples' cultural heritage,
beliefs, truth, and relationship to the land.
It stretches back in time.
We will not look at history.
And we will learn from it.
Oki is an invitation. A step forward.
Oki means hello.
Hello. Oki. Welcome to the land of the Black people.
So my vision for our sport visitors is for them to enjoy and respect the beauty of the land and its elements, and to compete in the spirit of sport and fair play, known in Blackfoot as Equivalency. And to all of you joining us today, I wish you lifelong health, playing sport and being active, known in Blackfoot as Akitsu Uwakumutsi. So this afternoon I was at a celebration of life for Clint Dunford, and he is one of the most creative problem solvers that I have had the opportunity to work with. When I look at this committee, I see that same passion and desire to be creative and to not say no, but to say, how can we do this? And how can we do this together? So I'd like to introduce you to the committee. Erin Crane, CEO of Tourism Lethbridge. Todd Coughlin is our chair. He's with the Lethbridge College, and he's also on the board of directors with Tourism Lethbridge. Travis Grindle with the City of Lethbridge. Bill Halma, University of Lethbridge. Dave Sain is with Lethbridge Roller Hockey, but he's on another assignment for Sport Council. Dominika Wojcik, Tourism Lethbridge. Becky Little, ENMAX Centre, who is hosting us this evening and providing the ambiance. Don Robb, Dragon Boat Festival. Jordan Deakins, Exhibition Park. And myself. Our goal is to advise Tourism Lethbridge and to connect and develop our networks. So So we've invited you here this evening, our partners, our friends, to join us in a fantastic announcement of the STEAM Pro Economic Impact and Media Impact Report for the 2022 Tim Hortons Brier. The official media release will go out tomorrow nationally.
Actually, in the beginning of August.
Beginning of August, nationally. That's. But while we have you here, we wanted to invite you to help us reinvigorate Lethbridge and the region to the amazing sport tourism community that we are. I will provide some background information. Derek will provide you with the Brier good news story regarding the economic impacts. Erin will talk about our vision and our plans, and Kirk will tell us about the local legacy that the Brier brought. So sport tourism is when people travel to a specific location for a sport event, either as participants or as spectators. I began with Sport Council in 2009, and since then, the industry has become much more sophisticated and much more strategic. The industry has doubled in the dollars generated within Canada from $2.6 billion in 2010 to $7.4 billion in 2019. It's the fastest growing tourism sector in Canada. Until COVID-19 pandemic shut down sport events, the sport tourism industry was a stabilizing force. Sport travelers, as you know, don't stop for anything. And we see this again as we return to sport and return to events. Lethbridge and Southern Alberta hosted the 1975 Canada Winter Games, and that got the region talking about what hosting can do for communities and for sport in the region. Following the 1996 Alberta Winter Games, the Lethbridge Sports Bid Committee was formed, and it was formed to help coordinate the bidding and hosting process. So there's been a coordination of this industry in Lethbridge for quite some time. And you can see, it mentioned before I clicked it, that we've been involved with the Sport Event Congress since 2000, and that was when Doug Krasnowski was in the industry involved. So that's the beginning of Sport Tourism Canada, really. Benefits. I'm talking to people who know about the benefits of sport tourism. We know that it impacts our businesses. We know that it promotes Lethbridge to the province, to the nation, to the world as well. And we also know that it provides experiences that will inspire our youth. Now, Lethbridge Sport Council, from our perspective, the word sport tourism, sport is the key word. This graphic, it takes information really from Sport Tourism Canada, and you can see that sport tourism is one quadrant of 4, but they all impact each other, and it really is dependent on where the sport organization is in its ebbs and flows. So you can use sport tourism to help develop your club, board of directors, your volunteers, your coaches, your officials, your athletes. But it can also be the other way around, where you are at a point where you have developed your club, and now it's like, let's give our club this experience. Let's give our athletes a hometown advantage and host an event here. Same goes for participation. It can lead to increased participation should you do specific projects around hosting, or with increased participation, now you want to host more events here so your team doesn't have to go to Grand Prairie, as much as we love Grand Prairie. And excellence, the idea of bringing Skate Canada International to Lethbridge so that the young figure skaters in the region can see what it looks like, what it feels like, speak to and figure skating is a great example because quite often the coaches and athletes will come beforehand to meet with local clubs and athletes to inspire them. So it's all interconnected, and we are so pleased with this committee being formed and with Erin that we've worked together in different ways being at Tourism Lethbridge to combine the tourism and the marketing and the research and the sales skills with the connection to sport. So enough of me. Let's get on to the main show. Welcome Derek Major. Thank you so much for coming to Lethbridge. He is with Data Jungle and the official economic impact provider for Sport Tourism Canada. The committee really felt it important to do a STEAM Pro on such a major event that had such a major contribution by the city of Lethbridge. This is the first time that the city has done a STEAM Pro, which is an actual as opposed to a predictor. So come on up, Derek Major.
Hi, and thank you, and thanks for having me in Lethbridge. Erin, thanks for inviting me back. I had a great time here at the Brier. I'm from Alberta originally, so any chance to come back, I'll say yes. The people are great, the beef's much better than where I live, so I'm here. I had a great time when I was here at the Brier. I came home with a tremendous set of data from the stuff we're going to show you. Came back with some golf balls, branded tourism, that I've been actively promoting by scattering through the woods of every place I've golfed since being here. And I even brought COVID back from Lethbridge, which was great. So I think we're all past that. We won't use that word anymore, okay? I think we all agree on that. I agree with everything Susan just said. I even actually put some of the same information in my slides. So we're on the same page. I'm a huge fan of sports. I've been involved in sports my whole life, personally, professionally. That's what I know, that's what I do. I really got into sport tourism, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago. I started working with Sport Tourism Canada, started doing research to really try to prove the benefits of sport tourism. You rewind the clock even a few years. It was such a new term. Not everyone really got it and understood it. Now, every municipality in this country pretty much has someone with the title sport tourism on a business card somewhere. Big cities, small towns, everyone in between is really starting to understand the impact of what sport and tourism can do for a community, for all the benefits that Susan just showed you, and then some. We could talk for hours on that subject, but that's not why we're here. But you can see it is the fastest growing sector, and at its core, pertaining to today's results, it's a grassroots economic development initiative. And whether you're at a small event, I was at my daughter's softball provincial championships 2 weeks ago in a small town. 16 girls teams and their accompanying families, and it raised hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of economic impact for this small town in the middle of Vancouver Island. So it doesn't need to be a large national event like the Brier to be significant. It all adds up, it's all worthwhile, it all builds capacity and all these other great things. When I think of sport tourism, I think of it holistically. And these are the 4 pillars that I like to talk about when we're talking about impact. You know, economic, which we'll talk about here in a minute, the media and the marketing impact, which again is part of this. We'll show you some results because we measured that here around the Brier for Lethbridge as well. But then there's also the community and the social side of things. So the economic deals with the people that came from out of town, stayed here, enjoyed themselves and spent money while they were here, and then they went home. The community and the social side is a big part of it. 74% of the people that attended the Brier were from Alberta. 25% were from Lethbridge itself. People obviously thought, hey, this is a great event coming to my city. I want to be part of this. I'm going to come out and support it. And they did. Now, unfortunately, the money they're spending doesn't count because it's not new money coming into the local economy, because that's the definition. But the civic pride of them saying, hey, friends, family, come stay with me. We're hosting the Brier. It's a great event. You'll have a great time. I'll show you around my great town. So from a community social side, it's important too, in terms of the strategy, what events you want to bid on and host, what's the community going to support and get behind? Are they going to volunteer for that because it's something they love? All those type of things. And then last but not least, sustainability, which can include so many different things. If we're talking environmental, we're talking legacy, we're talking, all these other things. Sustainability is a huge one and gaining a lot more popularity in sport hosting. Even when you look at the Olympics, they talk about sustainability of, we're going back to cities that have hosted Olympic Games before because the infrastructure to host the games is so ginormous, it cripples economies, and then these facilities never get used again because it's maybe not popular in their country, but they had to build a $30 million ski jump just to host it. So that's not a sustainable practice, and so the landscape globally is changing too. So just quickly on each of these pillars, as I said, economic, that's the financial impact of an event that can generate for a city, a region, a province, a country, with new money coming into that economy. The media side, think of it as your city as the brand and how your brand integrated into that event, whether it be through broadcast, whether it be through social media, and the reach that obtained for the event, and the dollar value that comes with all that publicity that you can't buy. The community, it's just what I said. It's the impact on the local population and in your community by hosting these events here. And the sustainability, as I said, there's a lot there, and we're not really going to touch on that because that's a topic unto itself. So specifically, the Brier, great event. Men's National Curling Championship, huge TV ratings, huge following. People travel all over to come to the Brier. Not unlike the Grey Cup. Doesn't matter who's playing in the Grey Cup, people will travel, they'll go cheer on their team even if their team doesn't have a chance of being in it, but it's a party and it's an iconic Canadian event. I would put the Brier in that same category. So here's just a few highlights of what happened. There was a cumulative attendance of almost 75,000 people walking through the gates here at the ENMAX Centre. There were 25 broadcasts on TSN and tons of coverage on repeat broadcasts throughout the evening, and they all got great ratings. The overall reach, 5.7 million people watched the Brier on television. Those are huge numbers. When we talk about the economic impact of the Brier, there's some big numbers here. There's a copy of the executive summary to the report that, as Susan said, is being made public here in a couple weeks, where all the details are in it. I will not bore you with all of that because that is not fair to anybody. But a couple of the highlights. First, just how it works. It's a positive change in the economic activity resulting specifically by hosting that event. And it's the new money coming into the economy specifically because of that event. Locals don't count. That's just a repurposing of spending. So when we're actually trying to figure out this, to come up with all these numbers, we have to go and get figures from all these different groups you see here on the left-hand side. So from the visitors, that's the participants, the spectators, the media, the VIP, everyone that came to town for that event. You add in all the operational costs that it took to put this event on, all the advertising, the staff salaries, the promotion of the materials, the renting of equipment, fencing, porta potties, whatever it might be. And then for certain events, there's capital expenditures required. You happen to have a fabulous facility that's just perfectly suited to host an event like the Brier. If you wanted to host a cycling event in a velodrome, I don't know if there's a cycling velodrome in Lethbridge. You would have to build one, hence a capital expenditure cost, but that's not applicable to this study. So what we actually did, how many people saw us out here, and you can see the photo and some of the team members here helped us. We were setting up these kiosks, and we had people walking around the concourses and into the stand. How many people saw a survey or an intercept going on that were here at the Brier? How many people were at the Brier, first of all? Okay, so but half the people that were here saw what was going on. The rest of you must not like curling. I don't know why you weren't here. It was a great event. But we set up these kiosks on the concourse, and we had this great table of Lethbridge swag and Okie pins and little stress rocks and sleeves of golf balls that I told you I've lost all of mine already, to hand out to people to say thank you for filling in this little survey for us. And I think there was a chance to win some gift cards at the end or something. And so you provide that incentive. People were more than happy to give us 5 minutes of their time, answer all the questions that we had needed for this study. And it worked out great. I mean, we were busy the whole time. We had great sets of volunteers, both from the council, from Tourism Lethbridge, and I think a few others. So thank you to all the volunteers. Oops, I'm going backwards. So in terms of the spending, there was, I think, a total of, I forgot how many people were here. There's about 17,000 people from out of town that descended on, 18,500 according to my report here, that came from out of town to stay in Lethbridge. They stayed an average of 5 nights in Lethbridge. They spent an average of $1,200 per party. When we added that up, that party size over those days, $10.5 million of direct expenditures going to local businesses, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, taxi companies, buying merchandise, buying clothing, going to a drugstore, whatever it might be. That's $10.5 million directly spent here from spectators. The other $350,000 is from the media, the VIPs, the athletes themselves, some delegates from curling, etc. So when you add all that up, $10.8 million layered in with the operational expenditures that Curling Canada and the local committees spent to actually put the event on, another 2.4. Overall, $13.2 million of direct spending happening right here. That is a big number in my opinion. Yeah. And so when you mention you haven't done a STEAM Pro before, and STEAM stands for Sport Tourism Economic Assessment Model, in case anyone was wondering, we're using real facts and figures to measure this. And a lot of times it's done as a return on investment analysis. So other than the people that are really in the know, does anyone know what it cost to bid on the Brier, to bring the Brier event, what the hosting fee is? Does anyone know what that number is? Well, council does, yeah, because you guys have to approve it. You have to shell out this money. So other than Mr. 64 over here, does anyone know the answer? Take a guess.
Oh, I don't need to guess.
Okay, so the number is? $1 million. So this city put up $1 million just to bring the event here, hoping there would... Uh-oh.
Angry support on its way.
Did I do something? Well, as our tech support is taking care of this, that I probably screwed up, that's a fabulous return on investment. So you're putting up $1 million hoping they will come. What's that, Field of Dreams? You build it, they will come. $13 million in return, I would take that return on investment any day. And it's more than just the direct expenditure at that time. There's an indirect impact and an induced impact that occurs because of this spending. And the simple analogy of that is, imagine you're going for dinner and you have a nice dinner, it costs you $100. That's the direct expenditures that happen there that evening. Well, the indirect expenditures is that restaurant had to buy the food, launder the linens, wash the cutlery, pay their staff to make your meal possible. Those are all indirect costs to support the direct expenditure. The induced impacts are, all right, I had a great meal, I tipped my server. Hopefully everyone else did as well. The server grabbed up all their tips. Maybe they went out that night and had some dinner or drinks themselves, saved up and bought themselves some shoes at the local shoe company. That's the repurposing of that same dollar that was only made available because of hosting that event. So it's the ripple effect of that money's going through the economy for days, months, and sometimes years to come. So the 13 million I showed you was just the direct expenditures. When you layer in all these things and add it all up, it was about $20 million in the province. Oh, it's coming back. Is that where I was? That is where I was. Excellent. So, here's some of the facts and figures you see in this little summary. Because we calculate, as I showed you in that chart, how it works. The outputs are in terms of GDP, which is the net income that is created here. Wages, salaries, job creation, job support, taxes at all levels of government. All that gets added up, and the numbers are tremendous. And when the full report comes out, feel free to read through it if you need some good sleeping material. And all these numbers are explained in there. But in all these different areas, they're tremendous figures. Again, just from hosting an event here for a week in Lethbridge. So I think they're great numbers. Any questions about the economic before I move on to the media? And again, the full report's coming out shortly. But anything about what I just talked about? Excellent. Either it's self-explanatory or I've already bored you all to sleep. When we decided to take on the economic impact, curling gets a ton of exposure. Canadians love curling. The broadcast numbers I showed you on TSN, the media reach every day in the paper, social media, etc., we decided, well, let's measure the media impact here as well. So here's a quick summary of the numbers from a media perspective, specifically associated with Lethbridge and the Brier. So print online, 5,600 stories from over 300 different sources. That's tremendous. AEV at the end stands for advertising equivalency value. And so how that number gets calculated, that if you were going to buy the same amount of space in that publication where that story showed up, that's how much it would cost. So when they add up all together, these are the numbers. And again, they're huge numbers. Social media, almost 2,500 different people decided to post something about the Brier in Lethbridge. And there was a total of almost 6,600 posts. Again, a huge reach in terms of all these people's social networks and how far reaching that message goes. And most of it was very, very, very positive, of course. And the AEV just unfortunately isn't as high because it's cheaper to buy an ad on Facebook than it is in the Toronto Sun, as an example. There was TSN ads that ran at every draw. So I think the city was given one per draw, if I'm not mistaken. And the 30-second spot rate of an ad generated it to that 5.7 million audience for another $35,000 in media value by running those ads. The broadcast exposure are the assets that Lethbridge and Oakey were given that showed up in broadcast, like in-ice branding as an example. Again, big numbers, almost $25 million in media exposure you would have had to pay to get the same coverage and publicity. Here's just a little more detail in terms of like some of the reach and the sentiment, right? And so we measure the content. Now, most news sentiment is neutral. It's just a factual story. Hey, the Brier's happening here in Lethbridge and Brad Gushu's likely to win it, blah, blah, blah. So the sentiment is neutral. You would have to really write positive descriptors or something nasty negative to it show up as negative. And you can see we're talking like print online, like 0.3, social media, 9%. That could be someone saying, I'm at the Brier and I'm waiting too long to get my curly fries. That's deemed as negative. So take that with a grain of salt. It was very, very positive all the way through and we analyzed everything. Here's some samples. These were just different news clips that we pulled out from publications of all different size from literally all corners of the country. The Salt Wire in Cape Breton Island, they were your biggest supporter. I think they posted like 131 stories about the Brier. Go Cape Breton. I'm an honorary Cape Bretoner, by the way. But you can see the stories from all, like from the Winnipeg Sun, local media, etc. It was so far-reaching, it was incredible. There was even a news story on Global News. Yeah, there was a good little interview by, your own Erin Crane. That was worth $102,000 in terms of media value you would have to pay to get that. There's also the social side. So again, posts from the athletes themselves traveling to Lethbridge, people here having a great time. The crew on the ice to, fans all over the place to the owned media that the City of Lethbridge and Tourism Lethbridge were posting to encourage it and to support it. So again, from so many different circles, ton of positive media. When I talked about the other exposure, these were some of the other examples that appeared in broadcast. So the City of Lethbridge and Oakey were the in-ice logos that were seen on every shot, on every draw, because that's how the camera follows the curling rock up and down the ice, to some of the vignettes that were run, or the scenery, what I call postcards. So at every intro of every broadcast and go on a commercial, the camera would pan out. There was a ton of exposure of the high-level bridge. There was a few other areas that they were setting up shop, and so your city and its attractions, its skyline, whatever it is part of the broadcast. Consider that tourism advertising, if you would. Even things like the media backdrop, where all the athletes would stand to get their stuff done, standing in front of a City of Lethbridge sign. So these are just some examples of the different forms of media integration that your brand as a city garnered from this event. Any questions on media before I jump into the last few things here? Okay, great. So sport tourism strategy. I'm really pleased of where Lethbridge is, and with Susan, with Erin, Bill, who I've spoken a lot with council that I've presented at before and is represented here, and the different stakeholders in the community and the entire sport community agreeing to come together for things like this. I think this is a great jumping off point on, hey, we've done some great things, but how can we be better? How can we improve upon this? How can we take advantage of this legacy and a bunch of the other great events we've hosted for the future? And so I always say, you know, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, Lethbridge? Like, where are you now and what do you want to be in the future? What does your sport tourism strategy have in mind?
Total world domination.
Perfect. You know, you're probably set right now, and this is where I'll start talking about capacity building, which I know Erin's going to jump into here in a minute. But to lead into it, assessing what you have. What venues do you have? What could we host with our existing infrastructure? What technical resources do we possess in town? What's the knowledge base of the people in this room and in the wider community? What's our volunteer base like? Do we have a database of that? Do we know how many people we could get out to volunteer at an event that needs 600 volunteers to be successful? How can we build that volunteer base? How can we build on things like transportation? As an example, I flew in from Vancouver. It was pretty hard to get a flight that worked directly into Lethbridge. So I figured, oh, easy. I'll fly into Calgary, I'll rent a car and drive up. Rental cars were $2,400 for 2.5 days. That's not feasible. I tried to take a bus. The Red Arrow doesn't run on Wednesdays between Calgary and Lethbridge. I'm only telling you this because when you're doing your assessment and your capacity, you're going to need to be honest with yourselves, and there's going to be a lot of things that fall on the positive side of the ledger, and there's going to be some things on the negative side of the ledger. And these will give you things to work on. There's always going to be a solution. I mean, there was a great car service that brought me here from Calgary today, and it worked out fabulous. Thank you, Erin. But these are things you're going to need to think about when you're bringing in people and expecting tens of thousands of people to come to your city. You're going to have to come up with solutions for anything that appears on maybe that other side of the ledger, right? And so these are hopefully going to be some of the exercises you're having as a community in the days, months, years to come to figure out where are we now and where do we want to be when we grow up. And there's a lot of options, there's a lot of paths you can take, but the alignment that I see here in Lethbridge between the stakeholders I mentioned and then some, you guys are ahead of the curve. Whether it feels like it to you or not, you're ahead of the curve. We talk to communities all over the country. We get asked to provide sport tourism strategy, to do different projects for them, and it's amazing how discombobulated other communities are in this country. They see the benefit of sport tourism, because some of those numbers we just showed, those are pretty big. That's a great return on investment. Everyone wants to be part of it. Everyone is going to be bidding against you to host that same event. What's going to make your hosting that event and your community stand out to win more of those bids, to be successful, to have these kind of returns, and to build and grow your capacity to be what you want to be when you grow up? So I'm going to leave you with that to think about. You're not going to be able to answer it today, but this is the work that you as a community, as a sport tourism community, are hopefully going to be doing so that hopefully I'm here enjoying more events in the future. So congratulations and good luck at the same time. Thanks for having me. I forgot, there's another slide. I'm going to leave you with this roadmap too. And Erin, this is your roadmap. And this is something that was developed by Sport Tourism Canada to help both the bidding for a host city and a sport organization. And so this is a successful cycle that we're using as the gold standard to start building your template around. And this can build business, community, and all the local sport along with some of those economic numbers. But if it's going to be strategic, you got to plan it, you got to deliver it, and you got to evaluate it. I'm a huge measurement guy. I believe there's a measurement tool for anything out there. So whenever you're planning, you want to also build a measurement plan, an evaluation plan. Figure it out, it is what you're going to measure, how you're going to measure it, and then hopefully you're measuring it consistently over time to see if you are moving up that ladder, if you would. So you set your objectives and measure against it. I'm such a huge believer in it. It's the only way you're going to know if that roadmap you just saw is working and successful. And I'm sure you guys will reap the benefits because of that if you follow some of these steps and the stuff I know you're going to be working on. So now I'll say thank you, and if you have any questions, let me know.
You just wanted to applause.
All right, okay. So any questions before I hand this off to your CEO of Tourism, Erin Crane?
How much does Tim Hortons pay to be the sponsor of the Brier?
Well, Tim Hortons has been a long-time sponsor of Curling Canada. And I don't know the exact number they pay, but it's a big chunk because a lot of my work is around sports sponsorship, is a lot of the work I do. And so we'll evaluate those opportunities for a brand like Tim Hortons. They have their own agency, but otherwise they could come to groups like mine saying, hey, Curling Canada is asking us for X million dollars over the next 8 years. Is it worth it or not? And then we would look at all these opportunities, add them up, and tell them yes or no. So I don't know their exact number. I don't know if that number was ever made public, but it's huge for something like that because they do a lot within curling. But everyone, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see some changes with a lot of sponsorships, whether it be Tim Hortons specifically or a lot of others. The world has been turned upside down the last few years, as we all know. Some businesses did great, some not as well. And I think you're going to see a lot of changes in sponsorship, whether it's issues like Hockey Canada, which is incredibly unfortunate that sponsors are dropping out of that, whether it's financial, whether it's a change of their strategic goals. I think that's a big shakeup for the sponsorship landscape. So that's a very long answer for a question I didn't have the answer to, but it's a lot of money. Otherwise, Erin Crane.
So, thank you, Derek. Thank you, Susan. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Crane. I am still calling myself the new CEO for Tourism Lethbridge. It's been about 6 months that I've been in the job, and I just want to say how welcomed I was, especially by the sport tourism group, right? I know some of you probably don't know this about me, but I did spend 6 years out on the road doing world championship boxing events all over the world. And so I know firsthand the value of sport tourism, right? And coming into Lethbridge, seeing the impact that it had on our community when I was working as the Director of Sales and Marketing for what was then the Ramada, which is now the Holiday Inn over here on the corner. Then I went over to the Lethbridge Lodge and was their sales manager for a few years, as well as the guest experience manager. And then during my time at the university, how many events did we put on over at the university that, brought all kinds of economic impact into the community? So we know this. The advisory committee knows this. And I think all of you know it. It's just learning how to tell that story. And thank you, Derek, for that roadmap. I think that's going to come in really handy. And we're going to try something out right now. So if you brought a phone with you, if you could pull it out, we're going to try some emerging technology. So I've got my fingers crossed, and I hope that it works. But if you can take a picture of this QR code, it should take you to our Mentimeter site. And we're going to ask you a few questions because we kind of know what the advisory committee wants, but we need to test this against all of you. So you can also go to menti.com and just put in that code if that QR code isn't working. I see it. I see everybody going very fast and rapidly. That's wonderful. Well, again, fingers crossed that it actually works. This will be a marvelous. Oh, good. Becky's giving me the thumbs up. Think we're doing good. You can start answering. You bet. First question should be a trick question, folks. Like, if I see some things I don't like on here, we're going to have to pull Derek up and have him do his talk all over again. Oh, great. Yes. Is everybody to the side? I see Travis, Ashley, thank you. Yep, we getting there. And what this is going to give us real-time responses so you guys can see everyone's responses up here on the screen, but then we can take this back to our Sport Tourism Advisory Committee and talk about next steps and how we move forward. Are we ready? So, do you believe sport tourism is important to the economy? Uh-oh, it's not showing up here live on my screen. Darn it. Let's see.
I'm going to take a guess and say yes is 100%.
I would hope so, right? It should be. It should be. Well, either way, you should be able to see the responses on your devices, and we'll make sure that we send this out to all of you afterwards as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention, Derek did talk about the economic impact report, as well as the media evaluation report. And so at the table with Amelia and Tate, you'll find a sign-in sheet. So if you want to receive those via email, you just need to come and tell us that, and we will share that information with you. And Susan had mentioned that we are working with Sport Tourism Canada on a press release that will go out at the beginning of August. They will initiate that, and then we will just be able to repost it and reshare it to keep that momentum going. And it's great that Sport Tourism Canada does that on our behalf, because I think that also elevates up. Okay, so the next question is, do you believe the organization that you are involved in would be interested in hosting an event? Because again, we know that the Curling Club has done a phenomenal job of bringing all of the events. I think, Kirk, you guys have hosted every major curling event now?
Every major, the one that's eluding us a bit, that's what we're trying.
Yeah, there we go. We're gonna get them all, right? And so we know that we do those things well. What are the other things that we could do? That's what today is partly about too, not only sharing the economic impact, but really talking about how do we keep this going, right? We know that there's some good, for $1 million, we got $13 million back. How do we keep that going? So the next question is, what sport do you feel that we could do really, really well, right? Going back to Derek's slide about where do we want to be, we know we can do curling. What else can we do, right? Gymnastics, disc golf. Gosh, we've got so many fantastic disc golf courses now in the city. Is there an event that you are involved in that you think that we could really host well, or one that you've seen or been to that you think has been able to really do this work really well? And again, this is giving us a bit of that roadmap to move forward, right? Who do we then need to go out and approach to say, hey, some of our community partners think that you would be really great at hosting a next event. How can we help? How do we get you there? I'm really bummed that this isn't working because it would look so pretty up there, but again, we'll get you all of the information at the end. So the next question is a little tricky, and you can see on the, we'll say if you're facing the screen on the left-hand side that you strongly disagree, and on the right-hand side that you strongly agree. So coming back to a little bit of that infrastructure, what do we need, how do we grow up? So these factors require additional support in order to host sporting events in Lethbridge. I strongly agree. So you can use your slider and move it over to the right, or you can stay on the left-hand side where it already is. So what do you think needs to happen here in Lethbridge to move sport tourism forward? Do we need better facilities and infrastructure, right? Derek talked about the challenges in getting here with transportation. Let's be honest, folks, that's going to be a tough one. Right now we have 2 flights per day at the Lethbridge Airport. We used to have 8, right? We need to build back up there. We used to have multiple transportation, not just Red Arrow, who now isn't even offering service every single day and used to do that work for us, right? So we have some things we need to build up here. Oh, whoops, I went forward one. What else is it that we need? Do we need better marketing and promotion? Do we need better political support? Oh my gosh, look at it, just got there. Uh-oh, hang on. Oh, I don't know, press B. I tell you, technology, it's so great when it works and so awful when it doesn't. But to go back to our question about strongly agree and strongly disagree, right? Do we need more industry support, right? What are those things? Volunteerism, workforce. Workforce has been a huge thing right now for all industries, but especially tourism, right? We are still struggling to come back from that. And, you know, some of that, you know, oh, look, there it goes, it's going. Yay. All right, let's try this. Oh. Okay. Actually, I still don't think it's working. But do you believe sport tourism is important to the economy? 37 people said no? I don't know. That seems a little tricky to me. It's going down, but alrighty. Well, there's a few more on there. We did ask for your overall feelings about sport tourism. So if you're following along on your device, please give us that feedback. And the last question, and we can just do this by a show of hands, because again, we are looking forward to attending the Sport Tourism Congress, which is coming up in Edmonton in November. And this is the biggest event for us to go to as a community to find those events to come back here. And Susan, you said since 2000, Lethbridge has been going. How many years have you gone? Since 2010, so that's been 12 years?
Couple virtual.
Oh my gosh, 12 years. So when we go to this event in November, we need to be able to go in strong. What is it that we need to take to Edmonton in order to get more of those right holders, right? They are right holders, to consider Lethbridge for their upcoming events. In the past, we have done, Sport Council did a kind of a sport facility handbook that had a bunch of the sport facilities listed. So we could always update that printed publication. One of the other options that we have is we have a fantastic new service provider here locally called Winged Whale Media. They do virtual reality videos. We just finished one for the meeting, incentive, conventions, and exhibitions market, otherwise known as MICE. If you see MICE out there, that's what it means: meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions. So we did a virtual reality tour of some of the meeting spaces in town. This space being one of them. Becky was in there, so we're getting ready to launch that. And we could do that as well for sport and go into some of the sporting venues and actually do kind of that 360 virtual reality guide to it. The other thing we talked about, do you remember, was we could just continue to go to more trade shows and events. Right? Do we need to invest more money to get out there and actively engage rather than just creating awareness? Do we need to be out talking to people, shaking hands, you know, doing some of that advocacy work? You know, what is it that you would like to see? So if you can consider those things, I wouldn't mind just polling you really quickly here. How many of you would like to see a printed version of kind of a sport facility directory for Lethbridge? Okay. How many of you believe a video would be equally effective? Okay, perfect, yeah. You can vote for more than one. We'll let you, yes. How many of you feel we need to go out and actively engage and shake more hands and make an impact that way? Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'm glad you're saying that, Mark Campbell, because we're coming to you for the for the request for the money, right? So, okay.
In the, I haven't seen your facilities guide or handbook, but to make it easy for these rights holders, and I suggest you do the speed dating portion of
Yes, we always do.
And in that, make it easy for these sports to know if they can host it there, because they know their requirements. Like if you've got a pool, what's the pool length? What's the spacing on the decks? What's the height? What's the lighting? Add some of those elements if they're not in there, because those will very quickly go through their list to say yes, yes, no, okay, can't do it. So make sure all the technical capabilities are in there along with some pretty pictures.
That's a good idea. Yeah, definitely. Excellent. All righty. Well, thank you for that audience participation moment. One of the things that I did want to let you all know about too, and this goes into the future of hosting events, is that one of the things that we have implemented is an events calendar. And again, this is through the Sport Tourism Advisory Group. We've created this calendar, we've been populating it. We haven't actually gotten yet to that point where we're sharing that information out yet, but we do plan to do that for you. And one of the reasons why, and again, this goes back to the economic impact reporting. So before coming to Tourism Lethbridge, I worked for Economic Development Lethbridge. And when I started at Economic Development Lethbridge, I was the Director of Event, Meeting, and Partnership Development. And I worked very closely with Susan at the Sport Council and the Sport Bid Committee at that time. And we had created a calendar back then to actually track these events because we could do economic impact reporting from that. Now, what we use is not as fancy as what Derek does, right? We use an economic multiplier that was created by Travel Alberta and Meetings Professional International, otherwise known as MPI. And that multiplier was created for us back in 2012. So it is outdated, it's pretty old, but it's the number that we have, and it's a great way to benchmark. And you can see on here that we have been tracking some of the event impact to our community since 2011. And you can see the years where that economic impact skyrocketed and almost got us up to 15 million, because that was hockey championships, basketball championships, Alberta Summer Games. We had the Mormon Historical Association, the Alberta Firefighters. This is why Lethbridge needs to focus in on meetings and sport development, right? It's this economic impact, which goes back again to all the things that Derek was talking about. It's financial, it's media, it's community development, and it's also sustainability. Every time these come in, there are legacy projects that usually get left behind, and this is the way our community grows. Right? So again, we want to go back to tracking this, but we need your help, right? The team from Tourism Lethbridge is here. They're fantastic. You can see them in their t-shirts. And what they're doing is they're tracking all of the events that we do, and they're reaching out to you to find out how many people came to your event, how many visitors came to your event. So any of that information that you can share is greatly appreciated. We would actually love it if you could reach out to us when you know that information rather than making us call you, but we'll do it either way.
Are you a member of Sport Tourism Canada?
Yes.
Well then, I got good news and bad news for you.
Oh, awesome.
The good news is you have access to the scheme model as a benefit
Yes.
of being a member.
Yes. And we do that for some of the bigger, yeah.
All this data entry and take all the information and like, okay, that's
Yeah.
the bad news.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least you'll have
Oh, yeah.
apples comparison in a model that you know is much more updated than that multiplier we got 10 years ago.
Yeah, so we have over the years, up until about 2016, used STEAM regularly for major events. But then we also had a 2-year period where we had partner funding that allowed us to do STEAM events for, or STEAM reports for all events, including weekend events. And it was at that time that we discovered the weekend events that are put on by clubs that don't give us the national recognition, but do support the community, and the economic impact and the legacy to the organizations are huge. But that number is larger regional, international, national ones that we bring in. They both have their purpose.
Yes.
But if we were able to do a comprehensive STEAM analysis on all events in Lethbridge, the regional, provincial ones would outweigh the national. But they, like I said, they all work together.
Yeah.
We need them both.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting at. Like, figure out what you want to be. Kamloops is a perfect example. They decided they wanted to be the tournament capital of Western Canada. They built some fields, some ballparks, not a huge infrastructure investment to put in some extra soccer fields or update some ball diamonds, and they run more tournaments than any other city I know of. And it's just from those little weekend tournaments, whether they be provincial or regional, that's their strategy, and they're killing it, right? So that's what they figured they wanted to do. And so that's exactly, I think we're all talking the same language, right? If you can get information from all these little events, capture that information, write some case studies, put that into the booklet that you plan on handing out. It shows that you're experienced running. You run tournaments every weekend.
Exactly.
You run thousands of events over the. Show that. That's showing everyone else that Lethbridge knows what they're doing. The people, the facilities, everything else. We know what we're doing. Let us show you by hosting your ABC event here next year. That's part of that whole exercise.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And everything matters. Small, medium, the big stuff, right? You know, again, the big shiny stuff is what gets all the media, but you know, the hockey tournaments every weekend. People are still coming into town, they're still staying at hotels, they're going out to dinner, they're shopping at our retailers. It all adds up. So the second thing up here that I just wanted to touch base on, again, was going back to sports marketing, right? We know that we need to get better at that, and we need to put in some financial support to that in order to let everybody know. But going back to Derek, right, is that we need to build that capacity. We need to figure out where is our niche? What can we do really well? So again, feel free to share that information with us. And the last thing is the capacity building. This is the start of it, but we hope to do this more and more. You're going to hear from Kirk, who's going to walk you through some of what they did, and there are support services within the city where we can help you get to those points. So if you're interested in hosting something, like there's an idea percolating, get with one of the team here today. You know, reach out to any of us, the Sport Tourism Advisory Committee. We'd love to have you join that if you're interested, right? That's what it's here for. It is support to help you do these things because we realize how important they are to our community and that the economic impact is there and it does make a big difference. And I think that is me finished, and I will turn it over to Kirk so you can tell everybody about how great it's been for, well, I'm putting words into your mouth now, Kirk, but it was great for the curling club.
So curling and the Lethbridge Curling Club, I think we want to go back. Curling has been around for a long, long, long time. I believe the Scottish really had a hard time because they came up with both curling and golf. Like you're bored to death when those are the two things you come up with. So curling's been around a long time, but it really only started to kind of get into the social consciousness. About 1998, it was the first time it was an Olympic sport in Nagano that it was recognized. It was in Salt Lake as a demonstration. And then we saw some world teams, and we saw some of our teams make it. And it was right after, sort of 1998, and that all of a sudden in the 2000s, we started watching curling on TV. We started caring about curling on TV, and it was like, oh, okay, what is this? So at the club, we decided very early on, as we started to see this grow, that we wanted to be part of this. We'd always had the club. We've always been involved in curling. Curling used to always be in the local rinks. You would have Canadian championships at your local rink. You would have Canadian mixed, Canadian seniors. Nothing was in big arenas. There wasn't 15,000 people watching it. It was just at your local club and doing that. But it sort of caught the imagination when it became an Olympic sport. It started to get on TSN a little bit and went from being sort of a niche sport into becoming something that's pretty watchable. So as a club, we decided, well, let's sort of see what we can do. And we stepped out and we got the 2007 Scotties. And from that point on, our DNA of our club has been to host major national and world events. We've made the decision, it's what we do, it's part of who we are. So we hosted in 2007, the Scotties. In 2012, the World Women's. In 2017, World Mixed Doubles, World Seniors. 2019, World Men's. And culminating in 2022, we hosted the Brier. That journey from probably about 2005, when we started to look at hosting a national event, to today, has brought us to a point where Curling Canada will always pick up the phone when we call. When we say to the chair or the president of Curling Canada, yeah, we're going to bid on the 25 Scotties. Great, give us a call, let us know. We know. But that came from a lot of hard work by a lot of people making sure that events like this happen. How we bid on things, there's some timelines up there, and we can talk about those. These guys have timelines and how to bid. There's lots of different ways to bid. But I think before I get into a little bit about the Brier, I want to just, if your organizations aren't looking at doing types of championships, whether it be, Little League, I don't care what it is, it has to become part of your DNA. It has to be something you want to do, that you build capacity in your organization to do. Because if your smaller organization doesn't have the capacity, it's hard to work with these guys out here that like the city, to go and ask for $1 million. Now that was fun, outside, standing in front of city and asking for $1 million. That's something new. But it worked very well, thank you, sir. So let's get to the Brier. So we started right after the 2019 World Men's. We came out of that. Curling Canada and World Curling Federation were just beside themselves. It was literally the single best World Men's that they had ever done. It was the most attended. It had the best dollars, had the best patch. It had the best everything. They were beside themselves. The week after the World Men's, we were told, put together a Brier bid. And we said, well, we're a little tired this week. We'll see what happens. So we went away and we said, yeah, we need to do a Brier. We need to get this done. We need to sort of add it to the four, right? The Scotties, World Women's, World Men's, Brier. So it's the four big ones. There's an asterisk there. So Kamloops and a couple of others, before about 2010-ish, the World Men's and World Ladies were played at the same time. So it was the same venue. So like I lived in Kamloops when they had the World Men's and World Women's. So Kamloops can say they hosted both, but they did it at the same time. So we kind of give them a little like this, yeah, whatever. So we thought, at this point, we need to get this Brier put together. We need to figure out when it's going to be. Now remember, it's 2019, right? The world is rosy. Here we go. We're all roaring along at 100 miles an hour, and life is good. When would be a really good year to host it? Well, let's see. 2019 now. By the time we get some money together, by the time we do this, 2022. What could go wrong? So here we are. We put the bid together. We put the bid committee together, and this is where we talk about your bid committee. Your bid committee needs to be small. It needs to be focused. It needs to be focusing on the bid, not the event. You're not there to plan the event. You're there to plan your bid. You need to get that sort of focused and together and what you need. Now, when you're planning a Brier or something like that, the first thing you have to do is figure out when I get in front of the esteemed council and ask them for money. I must say though, when it's the Lethbridge Curling Club, and I wasn't in front of council for the Scotties money, but I was there for World Men's, World Women's, and the Brier. And we have developed over the course of time a trust, I think, that, and that, you know, we're going to run a good event. We're not going to let the city down. We are going to make sure that this thing comes off and it is going to be good. And you saw all the numbers and the shininess. So anyway, so we get together with the city and we put this all together and we go and we get it's 2020 now, about January. We get the bid committee together, a small little committee, we figure out when we want. Let's get on the agenda for council. We're on the agenda for council for about April 2020, ring a bell? So COVID hits and we're like, what do we do? Well, let's go to council, we got to ask for the money. 2022, how long could it last? 2-3 months, this thing will be gone. So by June, we get in front of council finally, we get in person. And it was some hard conversations around what happens if. What happens if we can't hold it? What happens if? There's a lot of that what happens if conversations. But you know, we were confident and we got confidence from the city, and they said, yep, you know, go ahead, we'll give you the $1 million. If you get it, we'll give you the $1 million to go and get it done. So we sent off the bid. We put it together. We fired off the bid, and then you wait. And things kind of get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. We're thinking, oh, what the heck's going to go on? Well, next thing you know, Curling Canada phones up and says, yeah, you got the Brier for 22. Oh, great. Thanks. And now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. You know, from February 21 on, how are we going to make this? What's going to happen in this next year? As of January 1st, 2022, we had 5,700 tickets sold, with a caveat that if it doesn't happen, you'll get 100% of your money back. 60 days before, we knew we were at half capacity. We can sell 50% capacity. We knew we were at half capacity. At that time, they also said, on this date, we will let you go to full capacity. That was 4 days before the Brier started. So we didn't know. You know, we thought, you know, that's when they announced it, as of, you know, March 1st, you can have full capacity. So we sold tickets, and Curling Canada went out, and their marketing was, we're going to be full. And they sold the tickets, and I'll tell you a little story when I go to the next thing about what tickets are, really what the Brier, what it was, and what it could have been. So anyway, so here's the Brier. It's here. 4 days later, yeah, we can sell tickets. It's all up and running. The AGLC came in and licensed us for 2,000 people in the patch. I said, yeah, here, you can have 2,000. I said, great, thanks, we're good with that. So the Brier starts and runs. We had 74,000, I think was the number that, 74,230, I think is the number that you had. Had we been able to market it the way we normally would have, we would have probably run about 125,000 to 110 to 125,000. World Men's, we did 94,000 people in attendance. That 17,000 that you talked about from out of town probably would have been 40. You couldn't fly. You still couldn't fly. I mean, we could have full attendance in Alberta, but you couldn't get out of Ontario. You couldn't fly anywhere. It was hard. It was so, and people were still nervous about it. So, when we look at the numbers we did, we think that's extraordinary compared to what it could have been. I think it would have been huge. So what legacy does it leave us here? Well, it leaves us, we used 300 volunteers, 9,000 volunteer hours of people in Lethbridge is what they put out. Normally for the World Men's, we would have had 450 volunteers, so we pared it down. These are all COVID-based numbers because you had to make them a little smaller. 202 of those volunteers, we either indicated Lethbridge Curling Club as their home club or that they were from Lethbridge. So 100 volunteers came from out of town to help. Curling Canada athletes, there's 88 athletes, 23 coaches and trainers. Umpires and officials, 9. That's a bit of a funny number. 9 is the paid actual umpires that are on ice that you see with spinning the things around. There were another 40 or 50 officials, volunteers that were timers and statisticians and did all of the behind the scenes work. Curling Canada had a staff of 29. TSN staff was about 28 if you could catch them. Sometimes they seemed like 50, sometimes they seemed more. Yeah, Curling Canada gave me 80 hours, 7 million viewers, 3 million for the final game between Cooey. Curling Canada, just for some numbers, Curling Canada spent over $330,000. So they get $1 million, they spend over $330,000 just on their room nights for their athletes, coaches, and the whole thing. So that goes right back into the economy. And one of the cool things is the net revenue generated for 50-50 sales, which is what we get. As for hosting it, we said, we negotiated, we want the 50-50 sales, ticket sales, you guys work it out with Curling Alberta, Curling Canada. We netted out clear $147,000. Yeah. From between the 2007 Scotties and now, we have this legacy that's probably closing in on $500,000 worth of revenue that the curling club has generated from major events and from the stuff that we host. But it's more than that. We have built up a legacy of, we trained and certified 30 brand new level 2 officials in the Lethbridge Curling Club, which now gets us to be able to bid on, and I think 2020, my dates get mixed up. 23, we'll probably have the world or the men's Canadian senior championships at our club, and we can do that because we've built a legacy of, we have trained certified officials, we have people that have done it, we know how to run it. We know how to run a carpool. We know how to run all of these things that they need. They look at us and say, wow, you guys can do all of that. And that's the big legacy from that. We will get a bump in membership. We will probably get, I will say 100% bump in junior curlers registering this year. So we'll go from a normal sort of 60 to 70 junior curlers to well over 100 junior curlers this year. And that money that we bring in helps us subsidize those junior curling programs. We have junior curling programs where, for 16 weeks, kids can learn to curl for $10 a week. So, that money goes to help subsidize things like that. And we are going to continue on. We're trying to sort of start the circle over again, and, heads up, Mark, we'll be coming looking for some money for a Scotties in the next little while, and away we'll go. But like I say, it's the DNA of the club, it's what we do. And in the meantime, this year we're hosting a provincial curling championship at our club. We'll be hosting a Canadian next year. We host all sorts of clinics and training. All that money goes into bringing in top-notch coaches and officials to train our people and work with our kids and work with our adults. So the legacy is deep and broad. And if your organization can find any way to tap into a broader way and become a DNA and understand what this is, give it your best. So thank you very much for your support.
When I spoke earlier about the sport tourism culture changing, becoming more strategic and more sophisticated, that is one of the key pieces that helps a successful event, not just a bid. Where in the past in Lethbridge, we've had a chair of a bid committee and the stakeholders, and then we transitioned to a host committee, which was different and challenging, and I still could, I don't know anyone who could figure out how to write down a successful transition. So I think that just shows to the leadership experience of the curling club that doing that, having the same, at least the top few people the same in both, is imperative for success and just that transition. So, yeah. I think another legacy that has come from the curling hosting curling events is the expertise and the experience, just everything around ice makers in Lethbridge. And I believe 2 were just recognized.
Yes, our head ice maker, our assistant ice maker were named ice technicians of the year for Alberta. Wow.
And if you listen to any of the media around curling, ice making in Lethbridge, it just gets talked about. So that then is great for the club, great for the community. The other thing, just on a personal note, I moved here in 1999. I believe you hosted the Senior Nationals in 2001-ish. I came to university and so was stuck on the west side at the university and didn't see much of the community until that event came to town. I went to it. I'm from Northern Ontario, so curling was God, like in Saskatchewan or other small communities before the Olympics took it over. I went, it was at the old curling club, obviously, and went to say hello to my kindergarten teacher and my grade 12 and 13 English teacher who were there playing. So it was, yeah, sport tourism has so many fun little facts. I do want to mention one other thing that is fairly unique to Lethbridge that I found very annoying at the beginning of this portion of my career, and that is its openness. So when you go to City Council to ask for money in support of a sport event, everything is public. They don't give consent to administration to make decisions behind closed doors. That is what happens in many communities across the country. And I know this because when we bid for something, I'm in the news. I have Google alerts on to look for media reports around how much other communities, or first of all, who's bidding, and how much financial support they're giving. You know, strategic move. You can't find that in the news, except for Lethbridge. In Lethbridge, it'll be all over the place. Lethbridge supports this bid for this amount of money, and everyone in the nation knows it. And initially, to me, that was like, okay, now everyone knows competitive advantage. But what I discovered is in Lethbridge, having it open and having the community aware of what is happening from the very beginning starts community support around that event, and that is much more beneficial and positive than hiding things behind closed doors. So I just wanted to mention that because it was a several year growth process for me. So you've heard everyone. Thank you so much to Derek for coming to Lethbridge again, and we know you'll be back. To Erin, you have a wonderful team, and you, I think, provided a wonderful kickstart to rejuvenating this conversation. To everyone who came, to Kirk for sharing your experience. There's food, but there's also time to mingle and ask questions. So please stick around and do the networking so that you know who to contact when you need to contact someone. And thank you, Becky, for hosting us.